The morning sky over Europe was strangely quiet before the first engines rose from the horizon. A German officer later recalled looking up and feeling as if the heavens themselves were made of steel layer upon layers of American bombers stretching beyond sight. It was a vision of industrial power so vast that it seemed impossible only a few years earlier. To understand how such overwhelming force became reality, we have to turn back to a moment far removed from the battlefield, a quiet office in Detroit, May 1940. William Knudsen, president of General Motors, held a telegram from Washington. In it, President Roosevelt demanded something the world believed America could never deliver, an industrial surge capable of producing 50,000 military aircraft a year. At the time, American aircraft production barely reached 3,000 planes annually. Germany dismissed Roosevelt's goal as empty propaganda. Their intelligence reports insisted the United States lacked the workforce, the tooling, and the engineering culture required for true industrial warfare. They were wrong. What followed was a transformation that would shape the arsenal of democracy, ignite factories like the Willow Run bomber factory, and flood the skies with machines that would change the course of World War II. But behind those numbers lies a deeper question. How did a nation that seemed unprepared become the greatest air power manufacturer in history? When Roosevelt issued his call in May 1940, the world was already slipping into darkness. France was collapsing. Belgium and the Netherlands had fallen in rapid succession. British forces were being pushed toward the sea. Across the Atlantic, the United States possessed fewer than 3,000 military aircraft, a number so small that senior officers quietly wondered whether the nation could defend its own shores, let alone influence a global war. In the cold arithmetic of military power, American aircraft production seemed irrelevant. Yet Roosevelt's demand for 50,000 aircraft a year was not merely a strategic calculation. It was a recognition that industrial might, if properly organized, could determine the fate of nations. But to German intelligence, the proposal was laughable. Their analysts compiled reports, insisting America was a land of farmers and automobile workers, not an engine of industrial warfare. They calculated that even under ideal conditions, the United States might reach 10,000 aircraft a year by 1942. Anything more, they said, was fantasy. These assessments were not entirely unreasonable. American aircraft factories in 1939 resembled craft workshops more than modern production lines. At companies like Boeing Douglas and Lockheed, skilled teams built aircraft one at a time, hand-fitting components, shaping metal by feel, and adjusting every part until it matched. Precision existed, but scale did not. There were no moving assembly lines, no interchangeable parts, and no system capable of multiplying output by tens of thousands. Germany saw this and concluded American aircraft production could never threaten the Luftwaffe. But in Detroit, one man recognized what the Germans had missed. Charles Sorenson Ford Motor Company's master of production understood that assembly lines were not bound by the product they built, they were bound by process. He had watched the automobile shift from craft guilds to mass production, a revolution that turned the Model T into the most manufactured machine in human history. To Sorenson, the idea that aircraft could not be mass-produced was a failure of imagination, not engineering. His turning point came during a visit to Consolidated Aircraft's B-24 plant in San Diego. Sorenson walked the factory floor and saw workers building one bomber a day, measuring by hand, drilling by hand, filing edges to make mismatched parts fit. It reminded him not of modern industry, but of the world before Henry Ford's assembly line. That night, in a hotel room at the Coronado, he spread sketches across the table. He imagined breaking the B-24 into sub-assemblies, standardizing every piece, and designing tooling capable of producing identical components hour after hour. What emerged on paper was radical, a system that could produce one B-24 every single hour. It was an idea so ambitious that even aircraft executives laughed. But Sorenson knew what few understood. In 1940, that America's strength was not in what it was building, but in what it could build. His plan would soon give rise to the Willow Run bomber factory, a place destined to become the beating heart of the arsenal of democracy. And facing him was the most important question of all: would the nation trust him enough to try? The decision to build the Willow Run bomber factory marked the beginning of one of the largest industrial experiments in human history. Located on farmland west of Detroit, the site looked ordinary at first glance, just fields, trees, and the quiet bend of Willow Run Creek. But within months, that landscape transformed into a structure so vast that workers joked it looked less like a building and more like a continent under a single roof. Albert Kahn, the architect who had designed Ford's most ambitious plans, was tasked with creating something unprecedented. The result was a 3.5 million square foot L-shaped facility with a mile-long assembly line and a 90-degree turn engineered directly into the building. The roof covered 78 acres. Inside, thousands of machine tools waited to shape aluminum into the bones of a bomber. Outside, a dedicated airport with 6 runways and massive hangars allowed aircraft to be flown moments after completion. It was not merely a factory. It was a city power station, fire department, medical facilities, cafeterias, bus terminals, built for one purpose: to change the future of American aircraft production. But size alone did not equal success. By late 1941 and early 1942, Willow Run's scale seemed to work against it. Workers struggled with aluminum, a metal that demanded delicacy unfamiliar to automobile teams. Tooling crushed parts. Tolerances were off by fractions of an inch that mattered in flight, but not on highways. Engineering changes from the military arrived constantly, forcing Ford to halt sections of the line and rebuild equipment. Month after month, the output remained the same: 0 completed bombers. Newspapers mocked the effort, calling it "Will It Run" instead of "Willow Run." Congressional investigators questioned whether Ford had overreached. Even seasoned managers wondered if Sorenson's vision had been a step too far. But for the workers on the floor, the failure felt personal. A poorly driven rivet on a car might mean a warranty claim. A flaw on a bomber could mean 10 lives lost over Europe. That responsibility forged a sense of purpose inside the factory, quiet, heavy, and unmistakable. Sorenson responded, the only way he knew how: by breaking the massive problem into thousands of smaller ones. He reorganized production into 11 major assemblies and 69 sub-assemblies. He built training schools that operated day and night, teaching riveting, sheet metal work, hydraulics, and electrical systems to thousands each week. Willow Run became not only a factory, but an academy of aviation manufacturing, producing both bombers and the workers capable of building them. Progress came slowly, then all at once. In September 1942, after 11 months of struggle, the first complete B-24 rolled out of the plant. It was not ready for combat, and neither were the next 55 aircraft, but each carried lessons that reshaped the production system. Tools improved, workflows stabilized, quality tightened, and gradually a rhythm emerged inside the Willow Run bomber factory, the rhythm of a nation learning how to wage industrial war. That rhythm was about to change the world and fulfill the promise of the arsenal of democracy. By early 1943, the slow struggles inside Willow Run began to give way to something extraordinary. Output rose month after month. 31 bombers in January, 59 in February, 75 in March, 104 in April, 130 in May. The momentum felt less like improvement and more like ignition. The sub-assemblies moved in synchronized patterns. The mile-long line hummed with a steady pulse. The workers, many of whom had never touched a machine tool before the war, now shaped aluminum with the confidence of veterans. The Willow Run bomber factory was finally alive, and Willow Run was not alone. Across the country, a revolution was unfolding. Boeing's Plant 2 in Seattle turned out B-17 flying fortresses at a pace once thought impossible. Douglas Aircraft in Long Beach mass-produced C-47 transports, the backbone of Allied logistics. North American aviation perfected the P-51 Mustang, a fighter whose range would change the air war. Lockheed produced sleek P-38 Lightnings, twin-boom fighters that screamed across every theater. It was not a collection of factories anymore. It was a network, a living system. Together they formed the true physical shape of the arsenal of democracy, and at its heart was the accelerating rhythm of American aircraft production. The impact reached Europe with terrifying clarity. By mid-1943, German fighter pilots reported bomber formations that stretched from horizon to horizon, hundreds of B-17s and B-24s, guarded by waves of P-47s, and later the long-legged P-51s. Pilots who once claimed air superiority now described the sky as an avalanche. When one bomber fell, two more seemed to take its place the next day. When Germany destroyed a squadron, America replaced it within a week. Industrial war had its own logic, and Germany was beginning to understand it. The starkest lesson came during the Battle of the Bulge. The Germans launched their winter offensive under heavy cloud cover, knowing Allied air power was grounded. For several days, their columns punched through Belgian forests. But on December 23rd, the clouds lifted. Clear skies returned, along with the sound of engines. Hundreds of American fighters swept over the front lines. P-47 Thunderbolts dove onto armor columns. P-38 Lightnings hunted supply convoys. B-26 Marauders smashed road junctions and bridges. Heavy bombers of the 8th Air Force left their strategic targets and turned toward the Ardennes, dropping thousands of tons of bombs across German positions. More than 74,000 sorties and 111,000 tons of explosives fell in just a few weeks. One German officer described the scene as a sky filled with machines, built by a nation we believed could not build them. That belief rooted in early intelligence reports that dismissed American aircraft production had become a fatal error. Germany was fighting not just pilots but factories. It was fighting the speed of retooling, the reach of supply chains, the discipline of the assembly line. It was fighting Willow Run, Seattle, Long Beach, Fort Worth, cities of smoke and steel that never slept. By 1945, the Luftwaffe no longer controlled the sky. It could barely rise into it. And overhead flew the machines, born from the Willow Run bomber factory, the factories of the West Coast, and the vast engine of the arsenal of democracy machines that made German defeat only a matter of time. Long before victory was visible on any battlefield, a few American leaders understood where the war would truly be won. William Knudsen, once the most powerful industrial executive in the country, became the quiet architect of national mobilization. From Washington, he coordinated thousands of companies, redirecting steel, rubber, aluminum, and labor into a single purpose. In his view, courage and tactics mattered, but the side with deeper factories, faster retooling, and steadier supply chains would shape the final outcome. From that perspective, American aircraft production was not just an industrial achievement, it was a new form of national power. Across the ocean, Germany saw the consequences of misunderstanding that power. Albert Speer, Minister of Armaments, later wrote that German intelligence failed not because it lacked information, but because it lacked imagination. Reports from America describing assembly lines, tooling upgrades, and the rise of the Willow Run bomber factory were dismissed as exaggerations. Hitler believed quality would defeat quantity. Speer understood too late that quantity could evolve faster than quality could be perfected. The Third Reich, he wrote, was defeated by a flood of material we had no capacity to match. The strategic lesson rippled far beyond Europe. For Britain, Soviet Russia, and the occupied nations, America's manufacturing surge became proof that industrial democracy could outproduce totalitarian militarism. Roosevelt's phrase, "the arsenal of democracy," was not propaganda, but a description of a global lifeline. Food trucks, locomotives, tanks, ships, and above all, aircraft kept the Allies fighting on multiple fronts. Production itself became a form of diplomacy, a message sent not in words, but in crates, fuel drums, and the steady drone of engines. Today, historians point to this period as the moment modern warfare changed forever. Wars were no longer decided solely by generals' doctrines or elite units. They were decided by throughput, by how quickly a nation could train workers, replace losses, and put new machines into the field. In that sense, American aircraft production was not simply a wartime achievement. It was a demonstration that national survival in the 20th century depended on industrial resilience. The world took notice, and it still does. When the war finally ended and the engines fell silent, the world was left to make sense of what had happened. Factories that once roared day and night began to empty. The long assembly lines slowed, then stopped. Workers who had spent years shaping aluminum and steel returned to farms, offices, and small towns. Yet the legacy of those years of the choices made the risks taken and the machines built did not fade. It became part of the country's identity, etched into the memory of a generation. The achievement of American aircraft production was measured in numbers, 300,000 aircraft in 4 years, but its meaning lived in quieter moments. In the draftsman who stayed late to redesign a failing component, in the young woman who learned to rivet because her brothers were fighting overseas, in the test pilots who climbed into unfinished bombers, trusting the hands of strangers, in the families whose sons flew to Europe in aircraft built by the Willow Run bomber factory, Seattle's plant to Long Beach, Fort Worth, and dozens of other places stitched into the industrial fabric of a nation. This was the true shape of the arsenal of democracy. Not just steel, but people, ordinary citizens, who transformed wartime fear into disciplined, relentless effort. Their work shortened. The war protected the soldiers who carried the fight and helped end one of the darkest chapters in human history. And their legacy still raises a question worth asking today. What kind of strength must a nation preserve to endure the next great test? For many, that answer lies not only in military hardware, but in the resilience of its industries, the skill of its workers, and the unity of its society when the stakes are highest. The story of American aircraft production is ultimately a reminder that national power grows from individuals who decide that their labor, however small, matters. If this story resonates with you, if you believe the lessons of the arsenal of democracy still speak to the world we live in, consider joining us on this journey. Share your thoughts below. What do you see as the greatest legacy of this era? And what lessons should we carry forward? The war is long over, but the history is still being written. Thank you for watching.